Hello, everybody, on this beautiful summer last day of June. I am in Toronto, and it is absolutely gorgeous here. And my co-presenter is in a beautiful part of the province and beautiful part of the country as well. And I hope the weather there for you is as nice as it is for us here in Toronto. Thanks. Yeah, today's topic is a really interesting, it's a culmination of the presentations that we have been making this year and over the years. The culmination is it's really, how can organizations build their sustainability? How can they be looking at uh, the strategies that could help them in terms of downturns and downtimes in fundraising and the power that endowments actually can bring. So we start to look at it from two perspectives. One is from the not-for-profit, the charity's perspective, and how the charity can actually be implementing uh, the benefit of having an endowment, having a foundation, receiving funds from donor advised funds, but also how can advisors play an integral role in terms of advising the charities, advising the donors to support the charities around why an endowment can play an important role, not only for legacy for that individual and their family, but also for the benefit of their um, their organization in sustainability. So without any further ado, I'd love to take this opportunity to introduce my co-presenter, and that is Don Cranston. Don and I have known each other for it's got to be going into our third decade of going back in time, and it seems like it's been a very, very much shorter period of time. But through that period, we've actually seen, the mindset of charities, the mindset of donors, the mindset of investors, uh, sort of morph into doing more good with the good that they have been able to receive from the benefit of sage investment advice. How that investment advice has turned into looking at tax efficient giving strategies is an important consideration, and how philanthropy plays an important role in that area. Now, Don has Don was the founder of a firm called CGOV. He's the C, the Cranston in CGOV, and our our uh, intersection point was where CGOV was looking at establishing its own foundation, the CGOV Foundation. Now, CGOV, due to its success, was acquired by Fiera Capital, and Fiera looked at the different components of CGOV, and one of them was the CGOV Foundation, which became an area of interest not only for donor and client discussions, but also for the impact that charitable giving would have for organizations and the clients. So I'd love to turn this over to Don at this point and maybe talk a little bit about yourself and how we kind of arrived at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And first of all, I have to thank you for the very soft focus photograph you have me on the slide there. And I look far younger than I really am. Um, yes, I actually fell into this space due, as in many times in life, due to good fortune, being in the right place at the right time. It was a client of mine back, boy, it's almost 20 years ago that said when we were reviewing his assets, he said, "Well, remember these assets eventually go into four pots. First pot is for me. How much do I need in order to live my life? Second pot is for my beneficiaries or my children, and the third pot is the society. The fourth pot, which he wanted to avoid, was CRA. And his comment was, Don, you're helping me with one and two. Currently, you're also in concert with my other professionals, helping to prevent too much money going into bucket four, which is CRA. But what are you doing about bucket three and talking about the use of my capital after during my life or after I'm gone in order to benefit society. And that's when we went down the path of saying perhaps we should look at setting up a our own foundation for those clients who don't want to endow their funds elsewhere, just want to put their toe in the water by setting up a donor advised fund. And it's been a great journey, and great meeting many great people like Bill along the way. I come from this and with, I guess, feet in both camps, and that I am obviously advising clients and my own family on where they're to give money, going forward. But I'm also involved in a number of charities, not for profits, that are looking for funds as well. And part of that, getting into that side of the business, I realized that one of the huge challenges uh, uh, charities face is this ongoing crush to have enough cash flow coming in to fulfill their mission and vision. Um, but that grind of so much money being required takes up so much of their time. And so I'm a big believer in building assets, i.e. endowments, to allow the organizations to spend time on where they should be spending their time, and that's impacting society in the ways they want to, and spending less time on the administrative and fundraising side. So it's been a fascinating journey, um, um, and I'm really hoping that my industry, the financial services industry, sort of takes the charge in this going forward and starting to have these type of conversations with their clients. Because as I said to, and this is a line I use all the time, which is a bit blunt, but I typically sit down with clients and say, okay, Mr. Smith, let's say you've been dead for 10 years now, and how do you want to be remembered? And there usually is a very pregnant pause when that occurs, because they're facing their mortality moment. And but then they start thinking, yes, where do I want to be impactful? And the reason Bill and I connected was that a lot of clients come to charitable giving in two different ways, or a combination thereof. The first is they realize the tax benefits that's involved in gifting appreciated securities or registered assets, which Bill has just been enlightening me on. The other is that they obviously have a endeavor in society that they want to support, and it's been quite an interesting process educating people on both. One, the tax benefits, but even more importantly, the societal benefits of giving. And what I really enjoy is when a family gets beyond the money side, and they're seeing they become very bound in helping these charities beyond just the financial side. It's just a wonderful thing to see. You might want to flip to the next, because I've had a cup of coffee, Bill, and I'm
So,
rambling
so
on.
one of so Don, absolutely. One of the things that we encounter with donors over the years is the fact that the donors always are looking at, they love giving to the organization, but the question that they sometimes may not directly ask to the organization, but ask us as in our conversations is, Bill, where does that money go? Where has that money that I've been giving every year gone? What has it been doing? What has it been accomplishing? And it's not evidently clear to a lot of donors where their money has gone in a program and an operation, just as Don has described. But the larger the donation, the more the donor is interested in actually how that money has been used, how has it been invested in a program, in an operation, how has it kept the lights on. And one of the ways that, the larger the donation, the opportunity for actually creating something that would be that permanent fund for that organization in supporting whatever they are doing, whatever their values are, whatever their impact happens to be, whatever their mission is. How can they be doing this and generating a steady stream of income in moving forward? So, uh, Don, you've seen this time and time again, but as we're starting to look at creating this permanent fund, with these individuals, they're actually looking at, that stable source of funding. And nothing was clearer than when we ended up in COVID. A lot of organizations, people stopped giving altogether. And the organizations, a lot of them were really hamstrung if it wasn't for the government funding to come in and help support them. But those organizations that had a foundation or an endowment fund, they were able to kind of weather that storm. And, Don, there's nothing better than starting January 1 of every year, knowing that you've got a fund that will be generating X number of dollars every year on January 1st or whatever that anniversary date is to support the organization.
Yeah, bang on. So three different steps here. One is the day to day. Yes, so many organizations have to continue to be out on in the market or on the hustings, raising funds just to do their day to day operations. The next step would be if a family says, yes, I want to support you, trying to get at least a commitment from them for funding for an extended period of time, 3, 5, 7 years. But the ultimate is having that discussion with the donors, saying it would benefit us greatly if there was a permanent source of capital there from which we can draw upon in order for us to fulfill the mission and survive. And it may be a stage process in that building of rapport and trust with the family, where they may start off just with an annual gift, but when you I think communications is extremely important here, where you are communicating your successes and your failures. I think people give a lot of credit to organizations and individuals when they say we've had success here, but here's where we have challenges and may have failed. That honesty, I think, pays huge dividends, and that as that trust builds. Then they may say, yes, we're going to commit for the next 5 years. And ultimately, the final step is you guys are doing a tremendous job. We're very impressed. You are impactful in society. And here's several $1 million that we're going to endow to allow you a regular stream of income in order to go by year.
And it's really capturing the imagination of the donors with your strategic long-term planning. So if you can
Yes.
actually be articulating that to them, that they can take that away and sit down with their advisors to think about, well, this is something that is really important to us in terms of long-term planning. The question is always the donors don't always ask, but or the organizations don't articulate is the fact that how are they going to get to that funding for those long-term projects that everyone's so excited about?
Right.
And that becomes a bit of that the illustration for giving.
Yes. And the yeah. So on to the next slide. That's great.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that. I'm just
We
going to go
sort of
right here.
we,
Okay. Yeah,
there we
we're
go.
back.
Yes, we sort of quickly touched on this, but yeah, one of the main benefit for endowment is obviously sustainability. As Bill, you alluded to a moment ago, that occurred in COVID. There's nothing worse than opening the cupboards and see the cupboards are bare, saying, "Oh my goodness, we need so many dollars in order to fulfill what we need to fulfill," and there's nothing there. That can be a pretty scary moment. So building that. Basically a backup of capital that you know that you can draw on, and if their emergency occurs, you're still okay. And telling the donors, stressing sustainability to the donors, they get it. And as a matter of fact, what I've been doing a lot of my gifting lately is going to the various organizations and saying, I will, through my charitable gift, want to support you to do a sustainability plan in order to build capital, as opposed to rely on day to day or month by month donations, and building that kind of capacity internally. There's been a lot of support, and I, to build that type of long term support, as it says, program support. Touched on this a second ago. Communicate to your donors the importance of what you're doing, and don't assume that they know what you're doing. And I'm guilty as charged that John McIntyre reached out to me for the look at to give some money to the YMCA here in Toronto, and my first reaction was, why would I give money to a gym? And I didn't know the services being provided by the YMCA in Toronto. I went to the presentation, albeit because I owed John a favor, and what they displayed there was just, I was actually, as I get older and my testosterone drops, I get accused of crying all the time. I was in the back of the room crying, listening to the testimonials from some of the people who benefited from the programming at the YMCA. So get out there and tell your success stories, why you're important in the marketplace. And the last point here on this slide is this long-term commitment stability is so important, and trusting families. And once a family endows money, continue to communicate strongly with them, because there is probably further capital coming down the road should you continue to be successful and communicate well. So yeah, it's important to I'd rather you be out there in the marketplace telling your successes than being out in the marketplace begging for more money in order to survive. So
And
hopefully
the area here, Don, that you touch on is on the financial sustainability side. It's great to have an endowment that generates income. That one way, but the donor might be of two minds. So first is yes, I really like the idea of an endowment. I like the idea of putting money in every year that gets invested and continues to grow. Second part is I still like these programs, and I still think your programs need to be funded. And these are the programs that I have an interest in. And there's almost a way of bifurcating the donation, where maybe 60%, 70% goes directly into the endowment and starts to grow. And then 30% might be dispersed immediately to support those programs. So it's kind of, we've worked with a number of community foundations where it's, we called it the give and grow with them, and the give to actually give right now for the program, and then grow with the other funds that go into that fund.
Yeah, and Bill, I know you and I have chatted about this, is that there are some donors who say, you know what, I don't like the disbursement quota and being bound by that. And first of all, my comments when people bring that up, that's just, it's a mechanism to ensure that at least a minimum amount of giving is left. But what some families have said is that, well, once I give or endow monies to an organization, it's really the board that and the executives of that organization that make decide how much to disperse. I may want to give more or have more put to work than what they're willing. What you just said is that mix and match type routine is a way of doing that, saying, you know what, I'm going to, Mr. or ABC organization, I'm going to give you a further contribution this year, but yeah, 60% of it can go into that sustainable capital. The other 40% I want expended this year in order for you to go beyond the disbursement quota.
Absolutely. So we start to look at the next. So
But
what are the
yes,
steps, Don, in terms of getting to this point of actually getting a donor to think about making a gift to an endowment?
yeah, it can be quite a challenge. There was one organization I've dealt with for several years now that they were small. There wasn't really that much critical mass there, and all of a sudden, a family approached them with a very large amount of money. And be careful what you wish for sometimes, because it may come true. And all of a sudden, they were in this position where they don't have any of the structure in place to handle all this. So it doesn't take a lot of time or money to put these basic foundations in place, or I shouldn't, foundation can be probably wrong because we're dealing with foundations here, but infrastructure in place to handle that influx of money. So the first one is to put your policies together. And the typical comment when that occurs, oh boy, that I don't have any experience in that. That may take a lot of time. It may take a lot of money if I hire a lawyer in order to have to do all that. You can find ways of getting around that. For example, and I typically get the approval of the organization from which I'm copying from beforehand, but we have, and your advisors will have templates of other structural documents that are needed to be put in place that can serve as a template that you can then tailor or alter at the margin in order to meet your objectives. So, and as you get more and more successful, that's when you can step back and say, let's have a professional look at these policies and procedures and make sure that they are indeed appropriate, up to speed, and that there are any gaps in what we're doing. And then point number two is you select an investment provider, and that may be selecting that provider before you even have the money. And if it's a good investment advisor, that person should not have an issue with that, especially if you have sold them on the fact that what you're doing in the marketplace is very important. So getting that person in place, and I won't go down this rabbit hole and how do you do that. But some quick points is find someone who understands what you're doing and why it's important, that has a very good reputation in the marketplace. You can ask for referrals to do that. Making sure that the advisor you're hiring has a good track record, but the old saying, paper doesn't refuse ink, so you have to do your due diligence on that. Are the performance numbers GIPS verified, blah, 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 which again, I won't bore you on that, but just ensuring you do the homework to ensure you're picking a good advisor. And then point number three, you create the fund. You actually open it up and you start having monies coming through. And Bill, I think you're the one who taught me this. It's good to start that endowment fund with monies that are already ready to be put right in place, because you get a momentum building that really augurs well in the marketplace. So getting that up and running, and then you're up and running. And
Yeah,
then
one of our clients recently, they were kind of a hand to mouth, 500,000 every year, and they had a donor who actually approached us and said, "Look, you know what? I'm looking at maybe making a significant donation. I have no idea how much to give, but at the same time, I don't know if the organization knows how much they really need." And so, like going through and that point number one about drafting the endowment policies and so looking at the disbursement quotas and whatever the fund management fees might be and incorporated and all that, and how that amount would actually grow and address some of the funding challenges. So if you looked at a $500,000 annual and you just had one donor who would basically try to underwrite or agree to underwrite a big chunk of it, if not all of it, that was a number of $10 million. And they're like, I said, you're in no position because you don't have the policies. You don't have any, you have no one to actually manage the money. So it would be really difficult for anyone to actually come in and even give you $100,000 or $500,000 or whatever the number would be, let alone $10 million. So all these different stages need to be developed, and having a committee in place to actually help and oversee this with a committee of the board was really important. And that was the basis of how this one particular funder gave $10 million to establish a fund that still exists today. And that is the benefit of being able to do that long-term planning.
actually, if you just flip back for 1 second, Bill,
Sure.
I just want to focus on that last point a little bit more as well. And again, this would probably be another topic for you down the road, funding the endowment. Don't um, always go in with confidence, asking for a donation, and there's no problem with asking for more than what the donor can ask, and you just have to change your. These are all constructive conversations, and you can then read. Oh, if Miss Smith, if that ask is a little bit too aggressive, at what level would you feel comfortable with? There's ways you can have those type of discussions. Secondly, the other point I'll give is don't ever feel guilty about asking for referrals. In the law of reciprocity between human beings, if that someone thanks you for something, that's then indirectly opening them up to say, "How may I be of help to you?" And an easy way of doing that is by saying, obviously, our organization strikes home with you and is obviously doing its job to better society. Who else would you know that would be of interest in supporting us? And they may not have a name for you right then and there, but just say, if you could think about that, I'll call you in 2 weeks' time on Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we can discuss it further. And you indeed call them at 3 o'clock on that Friday, and 9 times out of 10 they will have names to give you. So maybe that's one of our further conversations, Bill, on the seminar. But there's ways to
Absolutely.
lightly but firmly ask for funding.
Indeed.
All right.
So,
So go ahead, Bill.
go ahead. No, no.
Yeah, so long-term growth. Yeah, so we're talking about launching a campaign here, and as we talked about in a moment, have all the structure, have all the collateral in place, and ready to hit the ground marketing. And Bill, you know much more about this game than I do, but so it's not a game; it's very serious. I always resent it when people use the term game, because this is very serious stuff. But you would be able to give far better advice on this side than I will. The whole seeking of major donors, that there's a real science in that as well. And what's fascinating compared to the way we used to do it uh, 30, 40 years ago now for me, there are some very interesting ways of identifying people through information that's on the internet. And Zoom Info, for example, is very, very interesting, where you can target people very directly, and get a very focused and qualified list of potential donors.
And
And that,
Don,
sorry, go ahead, Bill.
you and I are old school as well. So it's
Oh,
when we start to look at creating funding for an endowment fund from, these are kind of terms that are very fundraising specific, that the regular donors really don't understand how they're a major donor, how they're a planned gift donor. But one of the things that we really very much de rigueur in the investment community at KYC. Know your client, and so for fundraising purposes, you've got to know your donors. You really and the only way for people to really know their donors is to do something like so. Way back when, we used to just sit down with individuals and go through the values, views, interests, and priorities. What are the four things that really people associate with in terms of how they made money, how they spend their money, who they want to spend their money on, uh, and where that funding, that asset can go, and how much would they like to be giving to the government? How much, going back to your point. And it's really once you get an opportunity to sit down with individuals and get into a bit of a conversation with them. We used to just bring a pencil and paper and sit down. Now we've got the ability to actually send out, target, questionnaires to individuals so they can do it in the convenience of their own home and they can respond to it. But it's a bit of self-reflection that takes place in these conversations and these engagements with individuals as well. And
right.
from that, that's where the opportunity around thinking about different stages in their lives, different people that are significant to them, and how that can factor into their charitable giving, and how that charitable gift can result in something that is truly transformational, substantial for society.
Yeah, and this is how Bill and I initially met. Is I was coming across situations with families where um, they would say, "Okay, parents pass away. What is the tax hit when that happens?" And they were always staggered by that number. And then the next question would be, how do we reduce that? And um, the answer was really the only substantial way you can reduce that is through charitable giving. And let's look at that. And those are they're always fascinating discussions, because there was one family that I asked, are you involved philanthropically in giving? And they said yes. And this was a extremely wealthy family, and I perhaps made the error of asking how much they were giving each year, and it was about $10,000. And I said, how about a more manly position? And they were initially very upset with me saying that, but I think they went away and thought about that, and then 3 weeks later they called and said, "We took your shot in the face, uh, and have come back and thought about that, and we do have to be more impactful." Actually, that's when we use Giftabulator to show the planning around that. The other thing that's I think very good about having discussions with families is that there's one of the other benefits of this whole space is um, the benefit of the to the soul of helping your fellow man or nature or whatever it is, and thou art thy brother's keeper. And there have been a number of situations where dealing with family, and they're talking in one circumstance about a child who was not doing well in life, very self-centered, um, very we use the term poor willy, where there was no real self-actualization there. This person was actually just waiting for mom and dad to pass away, and they're going to get a ton of money and they can live life as they want. The family came to me and said, "We want to get involved." It was a community food center, and we want to get involved, and not only by giving money, but we're going to make Johnny actually work there. And it's been transformational for this guy, and he is now a very engaged human being. And so that connection through a charity has given the charity obviously received a lot of benefits from the family, but the family's also received some benefits from the charity. It's been quite an interesting situation. So I'm probably off plan here again, Bill. So you get me
No,
back.
no, this is great. No, no, we're right at the right point of looking at the initial funding and where this goes. So we could just cover this off relatively quickly with this. What we're really trying to engage individuals to understand that they don't have to start off with the largest donation. They can actually look at a starting point and what that would look like as it would grow over time, and what the disbursement of that donation would be on an annualized basis. And that really sets the framework for a lot of people to understand what it is that they can be doing. So you have to start off with a little bit of being philanthropic, being a good charitable annual donor. You can start at that. That's an important starting point. And one of the challenges of all of this is, and I think I can reflect back on your example of Johnny. So Johnny is probably not a philanthropic person. Johnny was probably a person who wasn't going to be a donor. But the fact was that that the parents who were donors don't necessarily mean that the kids are going to be philanthropic. Because the parents were philanthropic does not necessarily translate to the next generation or the generation after that. And that's where becoming involved with and getting the next generation engaged with all of these conversations is important to the ongoing support.
Hang on.
So when we start to look at unlocking the next two slides are all about looking at the potential, where that potential lies. And when we start to look at 60% of Canadians do not, over the age of 50, do not have a current will. That means that they may have a will, but it's not current. It hasn't been updated in the last 7 years, which is fascinating because there are things that change in people's lives. So whenever I meet with an individual, we're having a conversation. Question will always, the statement will be, you know what? I just went through this with my wife, and we sat down with our lawyer because things have changed in our family with our kids and other family members. And I think it's time that we need to update our will. And so that point in time is really important. But those people who are updating their wills, they may actually have a charitable bequest, but only 4% of people actually have a charitable bequest. And I know that they've been trying to move the numbers up from 4% to 5 or 6%, and that's great. But what we're really looking at is of the 4% that do have a charitable bequest, that means that 96% do not have a charitable bequest in their will. And so, what we're really trying to do is how can we be educating people about visualizing, illustrating what that would mean to them? And let's go back to the four areas of funding that Don would address. Yourself, your family, your charity, and the government.
Your
And
tax man.
and the charity side. So when Don is referring to the charity side, well, only 4% are addressing that number of all those people. So it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's like it's pretty obvious that the person that you're going to be talking to probably doesn't have a charitable bequest. Or if they do have a charitable bequest, it's probably one that says, I'll leave $25,000 in my estate and that will be it. Not realizing where all the other monies are going to go, what the heirs are going to get. Because if they said, how much would you like to leave to your heirs? They would say 100%. I'd like to leave 100% of the money to the heirs. And you'd say, well, that's not really kind of feasible to do it without really looking at some different financial strategies for you. But one of the ways that you could be looking at it is either leaving a specific amount of money that helps offset some of the tax. Two is a percentage of your estate. And three is tax zero. And how do we achieve that?
Yeah, it's shocking that when I meet new families, the first question I ask them is, "Do you have a will in place?" And that's not us. You need lawyers in order to get that completed. But it is shocking how many people do not have a will, and some of these are very, very wealthy people. And so, being the blunt old man that I am, my comment is, "Oh, so you want the courts to decide how your monies are then dispersed?" No. Well, you better get going. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we all meet our maker eventually. So it's important thing to do. The other thing for financial advisors, why this type of discussion is very important is, yes, most people in our industry, they're always competing about our performance is better here or our performance is better there. But when you're engaging families with discussions, what's it all about, Alfie? And where do you want your capital to be dispersed upon your death? You're in a far higher level discussion than your competitors are having, and that's a way of becoming the trusted advisor, and you're engaged with those families. That takes the relationship to a whole new level. I'm in a very tough part of my career right now because I've been dealing with families in some cases for 30 years, and they're typically 10 or 20 years older than I am. There's been a lot of funerals I've attended, and I usually sit back in those funerals thinking of the discussions I had with Mr. and Mrs. Smith many,
Mm.
many years ago, and realizing, oh my goodness, we are there. So yeah, not enough. And getting that, first of all, getting the number of wills completed in society is important, and then getting bequests included is extremely important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we start to look at how to increase your communications and marketing, a lot of organizations and everybody on today's call, as well as that we'll reach out to, they really rely on their website. Their website, they're counting on people coming to their websites to actually find out the best ways to give. Now, if we look at the numbers, the average number of visits to charity websites per year is 40,000. If you look at that on a monthly basis, that's 3,333. And if you do that on a daily basis, it's 100 visits. So if you have 100 visits to your site, and that only of those visits, of the visits, 0.6% actually result in a donation. And that donation that it results for those 100 visits per day is $106.71. It's great that they're giving, but you're not getting the numbers. You're not getting the critical mass of donations that are going to help you get to that next point based on your website. It's how can you be actually externally communicating pushing this out. We talked about this, I think, in webinar number 2 of 2025, that we were looking at the stewardship, the marketing, the communication channels that you can be implementing to be pushing out messages, to be educating your donors about the best ways for them to understand giving to your organizations, how they can be integrating with their advisors, how their advisors and themselves, because it's the three legs of the stool. We've got the perfect Venn diagram when we've got the donor, which is the investor or the client. You've got the advisor and you've got the charity. And when they all come together, that creates a very powerful discussion for the individual that goes beyond what's available on the website. And so the amount of money that we're not saying don't update your websites, don't upgrade them, but the reality is you have to find ways to be pushing your messaging out to your constituents on an ongoing basis, because you never know when they're going to need to think about something. And as long as you're continually informing them and educating them, then you're going to be able to empower them to make those larger decisions.
Yes, and that old saying, persistent but not pushy. Being out
Right.
there and take pride in what you're doing. You're making the world a better place, and so you should not be knocking on the door with any sense of guilt or shame or shyness. Like, be bold, and the world is your oyster.
And so this is where we get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts.
Right, and if I'll start on this, Bill, if I may. So again, typically two levels in any organization, including charitable organizations. That's at the strategic level, the board, and they're providing the vision, the mission, the oversight of the organization, the strategic objectives, and then they're providing committees below that in order to fulfill that mandate. And the big one here, obviously, is the investment committee, where you set up the terms by which the monies are going to be managed once endowments are in place. And the board's also there to ensure that there's proper governance and structure in place, that when you become successful, and this is the yin and yang of this type of thing. When you become successful in money raising, you also have to make sure there are other worries. Again, be careful what you wish for, because it may come true. There are other concerns and worries that come up, that now you have to be a prudent steward of these assets once they're on board, and providing proper financial oversight, and that's proper audits and reporting and all types of the concerns. The board is there to ensure that those steps are being taken care of in order to protect the the reputation of the organization.
Don, you and I've been through this a number of times. The composition of the investment committee. How does, a lot of boards may say, do you know what? I don't know how to put an investment committee together. What are some steps that they can undertake now?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, I said earlier, in templates. Before was with various documents or policies that you can put in place. The same with individuals. You'll run across people in the marketplace that may have representation on other organizations, and they're typically the kind of people that want to give back. So you can find people who are in the industry that can do that. As a matter of fact, in our firm, we promote our investment counselors to do that, because they become better individuals and better practitioners by being involved in charitable organizations. So and just ask your the both the strategic givers and the board members, ask to whom you may speak in order to attract people onto investment committees. There's many ways you can do that, Bill. And again, people shouldn't be timid about going forward and asking people to join.
And operational versus tactical.
Yeah, so it's a great point. So this is where some organizations have to have this very important discussion. The board, I believe, should be strategic, not tactical. I was on came on my first meeting on a board of an organization. They actually had a retail broker come in and give recommendations on what to do in the portfolio. Oh my goodness, I was polite, and this guy was a well-known representative or financial advisor, very polite, good advice. But after he left the room, I looked at everyone and said, "What type of board are we? Are we a tactical board or a strategic board? That if we're a tactical board, I do not have the time to be sitting down and accepting investment recommendations from an advisor." I believe that the board should set the criteria by which the money is to be managed. That should be put in an investment policy statement or a SIP, and then that's handed to the investment committee that then gives those constraints and objectives to the ultimate manager they're going to be hiring. So yeah, you need to have as you build this out within the organization, you have to say what is strategic, what is tactical, and who gets what. And my opinion is that the board should be at the strategic level. The employees and various committees are doing the tactical work and then reporting up to the board.
Yeah.
And here and the executives yeah. Now here's something that thank you, Bill. Bill put these slides on to keep me on plan. The day-to-day operations we're talking about, the executives and the various committees may be involved in the day-to-day, but reporting is critical. Reporting to the board, and ultimately the board or the various executives are reporting to other stakeholders, i.e., important donors on their successes and challenges. And so this is where the executives have to be very good at communicating what's going on. And I get it that there's not enough time in the day. And I know everyone that's on this call here, they're scarce as a resource. They think is money. In a lot of cases, it's time. And I realize how critical that is to people. And but it's important to do. And find ways you can leverage your time by communicating effectively, and in the internet and other ways of communication can aid you in this, but it's critical that you communicate, because if you're not, your competitors, and the charitable space, as we all know, is a competitive space as well. Your competitors are. So communicate often and well.
Yeah, and the communication is going back to supporting the strategic initiatives, the long-term planning that was discussed when the donor made that initial investment in the organization and the endowment fund. And the performance of that fund is really important to be using this to be updating your donors and your community about what it is that your fund has funded, how it's funded, how it's growing, what it's dispersed, and the impact that it's had. So a lot of people can jump on board with concepts like that as long as it's being effectively communicated.
Right.
So then now we start to get into again the whole concept of the role that the board plays in terms of representing the organization, making strategic plans with the executive team, and then more importantly is becoming the ambassadors for how the organization can continue to grow and build its sustainability. And the key to all of this is, just as we did in the previous slide, transparency. The more open the communication is with the constituents, the better it is to be actually engaging others. Donors will emerge because a donor who has given to your organization and seen the benefit of it will become your best person to promote the good work that you're doing. And I have seen time and time again where somebody had made a transformational gift, and the next thing that they would say is you wouldn't believe how many people have contacted me to congratulate me for my donation. And I've never met these people. They have been able to find me, send me an email, call me, leave me messages, and it's actually opened the door for me to actually talk about why I made that contribution, why that investment was so important. And it brought others to the table as well. So it's the ability to actually multiply, to use this as an exponential outcome is absolutely amazing when you see it in action.
Yeah, that could be a tough discussion, Bill. I had one client who's since passed away, a lovely lady, and she was giving a very large gift to a organization, and And I said, "You'll be putting your name down as the donor." She goes, "I want my name to be Anne, Anne Anonymous." And I thought that was a good joke. She was very, I guess, old Ontario, where we wanted to keep quiet underneath the cover. But and through guidance through other advisors, plus myself, she did understand you are setting an example in the marketplace, and she eventually let her name be known. And so those can be very interesting discussions as well. On the point about transparency, sorry, I'll let you get
That's okay. No, go ahead.
the again, this organization shall remain nameless, but recently I've been involved with an organization that was doing incredible work in both disadvantaged and indigenous youth programs. And it wasn't fraud, it was just bad management. And they were in a very difficult position. And they were quite concerned how the message would be received by the donors in the past, of which I am one. And they did a tremendous job. They were right up front about it, and they said, "Here are the challenges, but here's how we've continued to keep the programming going." And they turned that bad situation into victory, because a number of the large donors said, "Unfortunately, this happened. Like any human institution, mistakes happen. As long as the same mistakes don't occur over and over again. You've learned by this. You've continued to fulfill the mandate despite this challenge. Here is more money." And it was quite amazing watching that whole transition take place. So they turned it from a very negative situation to a positive one eventually, and they continue to fulfill their mandate today, which is good news.
So one of the aspects that we've been covering today was the concept of constructing an endowment. We've in the past in our webinars we've covered off how they can be doing it out of different assets, like their estate in their will, like an RSP or a RIF, and how that can be done either as a bequest or through a T1213. And then giving now, how they can be looking at stocks, mutual funds, registered investments, qualified small business corporations. And then we have spent an inordinate amount of time when the AMT was constructed to be able to illustrate the AMT at some point when it's going to be brought into play. But here's an example of, just a very simple illustration for a donor: $10,000 annual contribution over 5 years. So we would see the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and how it would be invested at 6% with an ROI and a disbursement of 3.5%, fund management fee of 1%. So 1 plus 3.5 minus 6 is 1.5%, which show the capital reinvestment over time. Now, for a donor to actually see this, they can actually understand how this would grow. And in a given growth situation, that $10,000 might be $6,000, and it would be 12,000, 18, so on and so forth. And how the disbursement of that would be, 4,000 for an immediate disbursement. Plus, we would be factoring in the two scenarios. But really, what we're really trying to do is just articulate for the people, because people are visual learners. And if you can be illustrating that for their benefit, that's really what we're hoping to achieve. So I know we're running short on time, but if there are any questions that anyone would have, Don and I would be pleased to answer them before the time that you have been so generous in allotting for us today runs out.
Maybe the message is that we spoke too much, Bill.
I think I think so, Don. Well, do you know what? I would like to thank Don and thank each and every one of you for making time today on this glorious day in June. And this will be available on our Funding Matters YouTube channel, just as all our other presentations are available. And there are, 15 years of blogs on the Funding Matters site that you can actually reference to various cases that we've developed. And there may be topics that may be of interest to you. And we encourage you to take those blogs, take those articles, customize them for yourself, and apply them to messaging to your constituents, your donors, your community, and others. Thank you. And thanks, Don.
My pleasure. Thank you.